All right, well, thank you all for coming. My name is Godwin Dixon. I am a career-long senior care professional. Done this for 35 years. My first exposure to dementia was when my grandmother got Alzheimer's. I watched her memories go back in time. I watched her start to forget more recent things, and then she forgot who we grandchildren were, and then she forgot who my mother was, and then she would wonder why my father wasn't at home, didn't he have schoolwork to do. I watched her go through generational confusion as she thought my aunt was at first recognized her as her daughter, then thought she was her sister, and then thought she was her mother. And I watched my aunt care for my grandmother, ruin her own health, and die within a year of my grandmother. And I recognized how difficult dealing with dementia could be, and that we needed to do something better. I had the honor of leading the Presbyterian Senior Care System in Dallas for 17 years. I was the CEO, and Theresa was my Chief Operating Officer. But we always had our dream of creating our own community, and we had traveled the country, we'd done things nationally, and we said, let's take the best practices from everywhere. We also said we had seen corners cut everywhere we'd been. We'd seen corners cut in the for-profit world for the sake of profits. In the not-for-profit world, we'd seen them use a big charitable load, so you robbed Peter to pay Paul, and we said, let's create a community where no corners were cut. And that's where we created Theresa's house. That is Theresa. She is actually on her way back right now from a presentation down in San Antonio. She is available by phone, so if we have a question that I can't answer, we're going to pull her on in. But obviously, this is a topic a lot of folks are interested in, and I was asked if we'd come back, and I'd be happy to. Because obviously this is a very important one. These are what our communities look like. We built houses. Why? Because nobody was raised in an institution. And especially when your world shrinks with memory issues, being in a familiar setting works much, much better. When we ran the Presbyterian system, we had state-of-the-art communities that won awards, but we always had to hide our exit doors because folks were always trying to go home. After about 6 months with this design, we recognized folks weren't hovering at the door, they weren't trying to get home, and we felt that was the best affirmation of the model. And it's worked really well. As I said, we didn't cut any corners. We won Best of Denton County our first year. We were also voted Best by Living Magazine. And you can see a little bit, we do equine therapy. Equine therapy is a wonderful thing that works with all sorts of different folks, but it also works with those with memory care issues. We're big believers in good food. That's our chef, Chef Angel. That's our cooking activity program, enjoying some beverages here and doing some intergenerational work. And we're very close. We're about 15 minutes away. We're right in Argonne. So that's the short version of us. And our promise was to bring world-class senior care to our area. After serving in Dallas for years, I've lived in Double Oak for 25 years. I now live in West Flower Mound, just 10 minutes away from this community, so we're now serving our community. But you're here to hear about dementia. We're going to talk about what it is, how do you help those with it, and what do you need to know. Now, as we go along, you're going to have questions. And you may have a question you think is stupid. There are no stupid questions. I guarantee you, whatever you're thinking, 3 other people are thinking it, but they don't have the guts to ask it. So feel free to ask a question. If I don't have the answer and we can't reach Theresa, we're going to make a note of it and we'll do a follow-up. So what is dementia? Well, it is a deterioration in intellectual functioning, affecting your memory, your thinking, and your social abilities, severely enough to interfere with your daily life. There are over 130 forms of dementia. We tend to say Alzheimer's disease, that is the most common one, but there's a lot of different ways you can get dementia. So what are the typical symptoms of dementia? Well, memory loss noticed by others. And that's a key differential because every one of us notices when we forget things. And you have that little thing in your head that goes, oh my gosh, is that the beginning of problems? And there is a big difference between word retrieval and forgetting. We all deal with having struggled to retrieve words. And I remember when I was a young professional and I would forget something, some of my resident family members would say, oh my gosh, I'm glad you do that too, because when I do it scares the beavers out of me. And I always joked that my wife had to outlive me because she could tell people I've always been forgetful, and it was very normal. But poor judgment is another area that you know that problems are starting to happen. Giving money to strangers, big red flag. okay? Getting scammed is another big red flag. And by the way, this doesn't mean you have dementia, but it may. My father-in-law recently got scammed. He doesn't have dementia. The scammers are very, very effective. But investments, and this is something I want to harp on. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a family come to me, mom and dad saved, they had everything set, and they got scammed, and now it's gone. If you have a loved one who you are worried about is having issues, get the investments out of their name. Get the accounts out of their name. If you are at all nervous about it, get them out of your name, because I've seen many a person that had planned everything lose everything when scammers. And I don't need to tell you, people prey on seniors with scammers. They go after them full bore. So have a family member you trust, give them access, protect them. So what are the typical symptoms of dementia? Well, language. If you're having difficulty finding the right words, we all have our moments with that. But when it starts to become a bigger issue, that can be a warning sign. Change in personality. Now this is a big one. If a person starts to develop paranoia that never did, or if they lose their initiative, all of a sudden somebody that really cared, they really dressed well, kept things immaculate, starts to let things go to pot, those are big concerns. So who will get it? Well, this isn't the good news, but 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's disease or another dementia. It is incredibly common. And unfortunately, the numbers are going to explode. About 6 million Americans have it now. By 2050, that's expected to more than double. Why is that? Because the baby boom generation is now starting to get to the age where this happened. The leading age of the baby boomers are turning 78 at the tune of 12,000 a day. And this is going to do a number of things. This is going to overwhelm senior care, because at the same time a lot more people are going to need care. We're going to have a lot less nurses and aides to provide care because a lot of them are baby boomers. So be aware of that. If you don't have long-term care insurance, I'd recommend you get it. When should you get it? When you're healthy. Because as soon as something happens, that ship is set. They don't want to touch it. I have had long-term care insurance since I was 45. And it's called the difficult, hard to understand, expensive insurance we all really need to have. To kind of put it in perspective, when I first came up to Dallas in 1992, a private room was $3,000 a month because I was paying an LVN $765. That same LVN now costs me $29, and that same private room in Dallas now goes for $15,000 a month. And that was before the baby boomers hit. So you are going to see costs rise dramatically. So if you can get insurance yourself, encourage your kids to get long-term care insurance, because the costs are going to go high. The number of people with Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years after 65. So in reality, your biggest risk factor is living longer. Every 5 years you hit, your chances double. So just recognize that, the great thing is you live longer, but you have a higher risk. So what are the typical symptoms? Well, getting lost while driving, or driving getting worse. And I mean serious lost. I mean, I've had a resident that the husband and wife decided to go to the convenience store and they ended up in Louisiana. That's not uncommon. So, seriously lost, that's a big concern. Something can get up. But difficulty reasoning is also something that can be an early sign, as is problem solving. If a person all of a sudden is just struggling with problem solving, that's a concern. Planning and organizing. These are some of the higher functioning parts of the brain, and as the brain is damaged and is dying, when those start to go, those are big warning signs. In addition, struggling to learn new things. Now, we joke, and I will tell you personally, I'm 57, I struggle with names these days. I can still sing every 80s song, every lyric to it, but ask me, introduce me and ask me 5 minutes from now, I probably don't remember that. That's common, and they talk about fluid memory versus crystallized memory. Crystallized memory is your wisdom. Fluid memory is what you just remembered a few minutes ago. That gets harder as we get older. But when you're really struggling to learn new things, that can be a concern. Confusion, disorientation. That's a big one. That's a big one when somebody is experiencing that. So, what do if you or a loved one start showing signs of dementia? You get to a doctor right away. to get a complete physical and try to rule out reversible symptoms, reversible problems. Now, this is one of the hardest things because when you're experiencing this, if you're experiencing this personally, so far in life, you have a 100% success rate of making it through. And you're like, oh, this will go away. I can just ignore it for a bit. If you ignore a reversible problem, you make things worse. My own mother had a brain tumor, and when it finally became clear to us that there was a problem, she admitted she'd known something was wrong for weeks, but she was scared to death of what that answer could be, and so she didn't want to deal with it. As such, the tumor grew and did more damage during that period of time. So just recognize there are reversible problems. You have to go to the doctor right away, but go to the right way. In the medical profession, we have a joke. Do you know what you call the person that went to medical school, who didn't really study that much, didn't really take it that serious, and passed their exams by 1 point? Doctor. You call that person doctor. Yes. There's a big difference between good and great in the medical field. You want great. And yes, if you are interested, we're capturing your information and we'll make recommendations of physicians. So there are two types of conditions that can present as dementia. Reversible and irreversible. True dementia is not reversible, but there are many things that can show as reversible, and those are the ones you need to get to the doctor on. So let's talk about reversible if successfully treated. Depression. Depression can lead to dementia symptoms, and if it is not managed, it can lead to dementia. So do not think it's okay just to ignore it. You do need to address it because you can actually get dementia from it. Tumors. My own mother had a brain tumor, as I said. Now hers was incurable, but many are curable. Many can be cut out, but the longer that tumor is growing in the brain, what's doing, it's growing and it's pressing the parts of the brain, and it will do damage to the brain. And so if you are feeling a little bit off, get that addressed because oftentimes those can be cut out and you can actually live a very, very good life. Normal pressure hydrocephalus. You've heard of water on the brain. That is something, again, very reversible, but if it's not addressed, it will do damage, and sometimes that damage is irreversible. So the sooner you get in and get it checked out, the better. Subdural hematoma, a brain bleed. You all remember Sonny and Cher? You remember what Sonny died of? Hit his head skiing, and he had a brain bleed that did not get addressed quickly enough, and he died. Especially if you were on blood thinners. If you hit your head, get to the hospital quickly. Because if we address it quickly, you can resolve before there's any damage. If not, you can create damage, you can create dementia, you can have death. Alcohol and drugs. Now this won't be a real popular stance, but study after study is showing no amount of alcohol is okay. Now I will tell you, I enjoy a drink, but I now have a drink once a week, where I used to have in the evening with either a glass or a wine or a glass of whiskey. Alcohol is not good for you, drugs are not good for you. And by the way, we are now starting to see in senior care those who did cocaine back in the 80s and 90s. And those that did marijuana, they have shown studies that it leaves little dark pinpricks throughout the brain. Cocaine leaves bigger dead spots in the brain. Alcohol and drugs can create problems, so just be aware of that. But also sleep deprivation. Not getting enough sleep can cause dementia-like symptoms, and if it's not addressed, it can lead to real problems. It is not uncommon for folks to have sleeping problems as they get older. Get it addressed. Go find a good doctor, because if you're not getting enough sleep, sleep is when your brain restores itself. And if you don't get that addressed, you're going to have problems. Hypothyroidism, low levels of thyroid hormones, can again cause dementia-like symptoms. All reversible, but you have to get it addressed. Dietary disorders, not eating healthy. And by the way, let me pause here for a second. Prior to COVID, the rise in seniors was like this. The rise in dementia was 3 times as much. Something we were doing was causing higher dementia. The estimates are probably food, probably processed food. Processed food's not good. If you've ever seen the documentary Super Size Me, where the guy goes to McDonald's every day for a month and eats breakfast, lunch, and dinner, his doctors beg him to quit. At the end of it, they actually set a McDonald's cheeseburger out on a counter, and it never molts. And when my kids were little, we watched that, and we bought a McDonald's cheeseburger, we bought a Wendy's, we bought a Burger King, and none of them ever molded. Months later, they didn't mold. The bread didn't mold, the cheese didn't mold, the meat didn't mold, nothing molded. I don't know what they're doing with food, but that convinced our kids to cut way back on those sort of things. By the way, Jason's Deli molded, Booyah Burger molded, Chick-fil-A molded a little bit. So anyway, but if you are not getting the right nutrition, it can lead to actual dementia-type symptoms. And then an infection, and this is a big one. If somebody quickly changes and starts acting crazy, that's not dementia. Something has happened, and a UTI is the one thing that will get a person to act like they have dementia the fastest. Okay? So be aware of that. You've got to get into the doctor quick on that. All right, so those are the reversible ones. These are then the irreversible ones. Alzheimer's disease, you've all heard of. Lewy body dementia, you've probably heard of. This is the second most common. Frontal temporal lobe dementia is the third most common, and last is vascular dementia. So let's talk a little bit about those. Alzheimer's disease, it is the most common type, it is progressive, and it is fatal. And I think by now most people realize that, but I've been amazed throughout my career how many folks think that there is a cure. There is not. Memories fade in reverse order. I shared with you about my grandmother going back in time. If you ask a person that is well into Alzheimer's, who's president, what year it is, you may get they may tell you Ronald Reagan's still president. They've gone back in time. It is not uncommon. The way it was explained to me, and I touched upon this a little bit later, if you think about your computer, if it could no longer save new files, i.e. it can no longer make new memories, that's what's happening with Alzheimer's, and then you start to delete the files from the most recent going backwards. The old files are perfect, but you're starting to delete and going backwards. That's what's happening with the Alzheimer's brain. That's why they can remember their childhood. That's why they can remember the past perfectly, but they can't remember current things. And it's, no matter how upset or angry or much you're stressed, those memories are just gone. So with Alzheimer's disease, it's very common for folks to get lost, especially to time and place. Not understanding what the date is, not understanding where they are, remembering a previous time where they lived. And often they'll say, I need to go home, and they're remembering a home that they lived in years ago. It's not uncommon for them to start asking about loved ones that have passed away. When you hear about beta amyloid and plaques, that's Alzheimer's disease. So now let's talk about Lewy body dementia. This is the second most common type of dementia. It is unusual cells found in the brain that kill nerve cells. This is a very difficult dementia. Folks with Lewy body have falls, they have delusions, they have insomnia. They have nightmares that seem real. I've had people tell me that monsters were coming out of their drapes. I've had them see horrific things. We had a resident who, we walked into a room one day and there were red dots all over the room because she'd taken her lipstick to kill the ants that she saw everywhere. There were no ants, but she was seeing them. Very, very difficult one. Treatment of this one is very, very difficult. And one of the challenging things is that parts of the brain still work quite well. I had a resident with Lewy body who I walked in and she was watching the news, and we had a great discussion about what was going on in the world right then. And she knew everything that was going on right then. But then she asked me to please get the man out of the wall that was bothering her. She had knocked a hole in her wall and she was convinced there was a man in there smiling and mocking at her. That's a very unpleasant experience, and yet she was still very alert and oriented in other areas. It's a very bizarre one, and it's part of the reason the treatment is so difficult. So frontal temporal lobe dementia. What are your frontal temporal lobes? Well, those are the last things that develop. You know, we talk about, especially boys, how they develop a little bit late, and when they develop late, before they develop, oftentimes those kids will say things they shouldn't say, they'll take risks they shouldn't take. Well, when that part of the brain starts to get damaged, you get impulsive and behavior problems. You will have a person say unexpected and rude things and mean things. The filter is gone and things will just come out. They also will oftentimes get very apathetic and not care anymore. So those are other symptoms that it may well be frontal temporal lobe. And like I said, they can be very embarrassing because folks will say things that will shock you. Now, vascular dementia, your vascular system is your blood system. That is caused by loss of blood flow to parts of the brain, otherwise known as strokes. So in a stroke, the blood is blocked to that part of the brain, and if you don't get blood flowing to that part of the brain will die. That's why if you have a stroke, it's so important to get to the hospital immediately, because certain strokes, they can break up whatever is causing the blockage and get the blood flowing back in. If they can get the blood flowing back in, it can be healed and you're fine. If not, that part of the brain dies and it is dead, and it is not coming back. Not uncommon when you see the brain of a person with strokes to actually see a dark spot there where it has died. Diabetes, high blood pressure, and cholesterol can all affect vascular dementia. So if you have any of these, manage them well, because otherwise you can actually damage your brain. Folks with this sort of dementia can have really good and really bad days, which makes it really challenging because parts of this brain are still functioning and parts are not. And on their good days, you're like, wow, hey, I thought they had dementia. No, they're doing great. And then the next day, you're like, oh my gosh, what happened to the person from yesterday? They're doing horribly. And it can just be an emotional roller coaster back and forth. It is, as such, the least predictable. It is partially least predictable because different parts of your brain control different things. And so if my stroke hit this part and your stroke hit this part, we show up very differently. Because now the parts of this part of the brain aren't working for me, but they're still working for you. But the parts that affect that part of the brain aren't working for you, but they're working for me. Alzheimer's we can predict pretty well. Strokes we can't, because it is all what part of the brain was damaged. So what is happening with dementia? Well, it is progressive brain damage. You know, sometimes a person will have an injury and they'll have brain damage, but that was a one-time thing. This, it is continuing, and the damage is continuing. Sadly, the brain is dying. And that's brutal to hear and to think about, but that is what is happening. And as it dies, it shrinks. The term is atrophy. Now, you all remember Bob Dole. When Bob Dole ran for president, you may remember he had an arm that didn't work. It had been injured in World War II, and it had atrophied, and it had shrunk. That's an example of atrophy. The right calf is healthy, the left calf has atrophy. You didn't expect Bob Dole's arm to work. You don't expect that left calf to work. The problem is, you can't see in my head. And so when a person's brain is dying, they still look like themselves, they still may smile like themselves, they may still have all the social skills, but the brain is dying and it is not working as well, and it's not going to work as well. And that's the hardest thing to understand is that, and I will tell you, I remember when my own mother was no longer making sense, and she had her PhD, she had her doctorate, she was a brilliant woman, and the voice and the face that had been incredible my whole life was not making sense. It wouldn't ever make sense again. I had to mentally switch out of son mode into caregiver mode because son mode was ripping my heart out. And if you have a loved one going through this, you have to do what you have to do to protect yourself because that person that you love is no longer there. My father talked about how upsetting it was that his best friend, who he counted on every night to debrief the day, was no longer there. And so that is very natural. On the left, you have a healthy brain. On the right, you have a severe Alzheimer's brain. And I'm sorry that the picture's not a little bit better, but there's big gaps in that brain where the healthy functioning brain used to be. If you could see inside the head, that's what you would see. That's what they find on autopsies. So that is a reality. Your whole goal, if you love somebody who has dementia, is to answer prayers by helping seniors go through dementia with their dignity intact. We don't have a cure. All we can do is support them. And this is a disease that takes every bit of dignity away from people, unless we can try to work to restore them. In Isaiah 46:4, and I apologize, I come from a Christian tradition that says, even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he who will sustain you and I will carry you, I will sustain you and I will rescue you. How does God answer prayers? When the folks closest to the person with dementia support them and support them through. Now, that doesn't mean wearing yourself out. And you all know the analogy of when you're in an airplane, they say when the oxygen masks drop, do they say put oxygen on others first? No, they say put it on yourself first, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And you have to take care of yourself so that you can be there for a loved one. That's getting out. So how do you help someone with dementia? Well, you understand what's going on. And as I said, with Alzheimer's, as I said, it is going in reverse. With the other dementias, it can be all over the place. Put them in positions to succeed, okay? Now, I'm going to give you an example here, okay? Tell me your name, please. Kathy? Kathy, you know, I loved visiting with you about 10 minutes ago, and it was fascinating, all the things you told me, okay? You remember what we talked about, don't you? You have no idea what I'm talking about, do you? Okay? We didn't talk 10 minutes ago. But if she had dementia and we had talked 10 minutes ago, she wouldn't remember it. Okay? And how awkward would that feel if you didn't remember that? Okay? Now imagine if you are forgetting things you should know. Okay? You're forgetting names, you're forgetting what you had for breakfast, you're forgetting what we just talked about, and I keep saying you're wrong. And I keep correcting you, and I keep telling you what's wrong. How are you going to feel? Horrible. And yet that's what we do. We think we're helping. We say, oh, come on, we just had that talk. Oh, come on, you remember. If you can't remember it, your brain is dying, and I consistently correct you, and I consistently tell you you're wrong, your life is miserable. And I will tell you, when I talk to our staff, I give the analogy, when I'm in trouble with my wife, and she's just mad, and everything she tells me is wrong, I just shut down. I just get really quiet, because I'm going to get told I'm wrong on everything. Well, that's what's going on with a person with dementia. They can't help that they can't remember what they just said. They can't help that they remember what you just told them to do. So don't remind them of that. Put them in positions to succeed. What do they remember? The past. So if you think about it, if it's so normal to say something, hey, what do you have for breakfast today? What do you have for lunch? What do you do today? That's how we're first. But if instead I say, you know what, I was remembering, you told me you were born in Georgia. And tell me about that. Tell me about where you're from. Now I'm asking you something you can answer. Think about it, if you walked into a meeting completely unprepared and everybody was asking you questions you didn't know the answer to, you'd feel horrible. But if they ask you things you can answer, so that's the challenge, is think, what can they remember, what can they do? Talk about the past, not the present. And then again, as you learn their form of dementia, figure out what they still can do, what they can't do. President Reagan, you all know, had Alzheimer's. They would have him clean the leaves out of his pool. Now you think about it, the man had been president of the United States, but as his dementia went on, he couldn't do high-level things, but when he cleaned the leaves out, they said, Ronnie, that's great, you did a wonderful job. All of a sudden he had purpose again. He felt good. They'd go lead him to the next activity, they'd throw the leaves back in the pool. They'd go do parties, they'd do fun, and then they'd go back and he'd clean the pool, leaves out of the pool again, because they were putting him in a position to do something he did. And his daughter would say, we have parties every day, he doesn't remember it the next day, but if we made that day fun and successful, that's what our goal was. So how do you help somebody with dementia? You talk more slowly, in a calm voice, using familiar words. Now I want you to think about, have you ever had a day where your brain wasn't working really well? Maybe you'd come out of anesthesia, maybe you had a concussion, maybe you had a little too much to drink the night before. Whatever it was, and maybe you came out of COVID with a fog. You've all experienced days when your brain wasn't working really well. And on days where you felt like heck, maybe you've been sick, maybe you've been lousy, did you need people to be a little bit nicer to you? Did you need people to talk a little bit more slowly? Maybe not as many bright lights, maybe not as noisy? Did you need people to slow things down? Because if I talk to you at a really fast pace, your brain's got to be really, really working, okay? But if I talk slowly and I use simpler words, now all of what you can understand. One of the things with dementia is language starts to go. And if you think about it, if you've ever heard somebody using all sorts of big words, you've really got to focus. You've really got to pay attention. But if somebody's talking to you at a second or third grade level, and you can communicate most of what you need at a second or third grade level, and if you do it slowly and rhythmically, all of a sudden the person can understand. So again, think about your worst day and recognize that is this person's everyday life, and it's getting worse. Every day as their brain continues to die. So if you can slow it down and use a calm voice, keeping it short and simple, recognizing if I give you a whole bunch of instructions at once, I'm probably going to overwhelm you, but if I can break it down, that's much, much better. And then giving options. And actually one other thing on the short and simple. An occupational therapist was a pioneer in dementia care because she had worked with brain-injured young people. And she recognized the same thing she did with the brain-injured young people, worked with the seniors with dementia. Something as simple as put your shoes and socks on. There's a lot of steps involved in put your shoes and socks on. But if instead you say, grab your sock, okay, pull it over your toes, now pull it down to your heel, now pull it up, now grab the shoe, and you break it into simple steps, all of a sudden the person can do it. And you've all seen people with dementia struggle with dressing. Wear the same clothes day in and day out. Why? Because it's hard to figure out putting new clothes on, so it's simpler just to wear them. So if you can break them into simple steps. The other thing is give options.
Don't say, hey, where do you want to go for lunch today? Instead say, do you want to go to 408 Barbecue or do you want to go to Earl's 377? If you give me choices, I can easily choose a choice. But if you make me think through things, now you're challenging a brain that is not. It's much like that image of the calf that wasn't working. If I said jump, that's not going to work. Giving options, you want to wear this outfit, you want to wear this outfit. Do you want to watch this TV program, do you want to watch this TV program? Break tasks and movements down into one simple step at a time. Rather than, hey, let's go get in the car, hey, let's go. Stand up, come on, let's walk with me. Hey, let's go to the door. All right, let's go around to this side. Let's get you into the car. Breaking into simple steps, now all of a sudden, my brain can handle that. And I'm not getting overwhelmed and I'm not getting overwhelmed. Because if you overwhelm me, A, I may shut down, B, I may get angry. We've all seen that as well. Those are very, very common. In addition, use empathy. The hardest time for a person with dementia is in the earlier stages when they have a foot in reality and a foot in dementia. And they recognize they're starting to lose their memory. That is horrific. We can all appreciate how horrific that would be if we ever faced that. And so using empathy, I am sorry. I know this is hard, but I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to make sure you get the care you need. Speaking to that need for safety, because you can appreciate if you're starting to lose your faculties, if those that are around you love you, empathize with you, and make sure that they let you know they're going to take care of you. That's one of the few things, one of the gifts they can give. It's also quite okay to say, this is hard, and I'm sorry, because it is frustrating when a person's struggling. And you can appreciate if you keep getting everything wrong, you're beating yourself up, if those around you say, wow, I know this is tough, but I'm here for you. I'll support you. Give up being right, okay? Your loved one is going to be remembering past things like it's happening, and they're going to be adamant about it, and the more you argue, the more they have to fight you, okay? Because if I keep telling you we had a great conversation 10 minutes ago and you're sure we didn't, you know, we're just going to butt heads again and again. Also recognize that sometimes symbols can mean things. One of the techniques they taught us was validation therapy, which is to validate the emotion. Don't say a person's right, don't say a person's wrong. You will have a person sometimes accuse you of stealing. They may accuse you of all sorts of things. They may talk about a past loved one, you know, like they're still alive. Don't tell them they're right or wrong, but instead just say, wow, I understand, that's frustrating. Tell me what's going on. And an example that was given to us once was if you go to a restaurant and the food is not good, and you say to the waiter, this food isn't good, and the waiter goes, our food's fine. How do you feel? You're probably mad. If instead the waiter says, oh my goodness, the food isn't good, I am so sorry, I'm on top of this. Now he didn't agree with you, he just got upset with you, you calm down. So if a person with dementia is upset, get upset with them. Okay? Don't tell them they're right, don't tell them they're wrong, just get upset with them. That's called validation. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Focus on today and on tasks they can do helpfully. You know, things that that used to be mundane, folding clothes, washing laundry, setting tables, doing those sort of things, all of a sudden can be outside meaningful experience for a person with dementia because they're struggling with everything. All of a sudden you've given them something they can do. I tell our staff all the time, have the dementia residents fold laundry. Have them help you set the table. Yes, you may have to go back and do it again. Yes, they may do it poorly, but all of a sudden they've been able to do something. We had a resident who'd been a handyman, we let him paint our walls. We had to go back and redo them after he was done, but he felt good about it again. Right? So some final tips, don't argue. Don't argue because, again, they're in a different reality and it's not going to make a change. One of the validation things, do encourage. Do encourage, don't argue, say, all right, yep, I know that's upsetting, let's work on this, hey, let's take these actions. Don't tell them they're wrong. Because if you are convinced, if a resident, and one of the things I use with my staff are often mothers, and I will use the example, if you are remembering a past injury to your child and you're worried about your child's safety, and I keep telling you your child is now in their 50s, you're not going to feel very good about it. You're relaying something. If I can instead validate those emotions, it's much better. So with validation, we had a resident who every afternoon would accuse us of stealing. And she would come out of her room, oh my gosh, you guys are a bunch of thieves. You guys are a bunch of thieves. I'm losing everything here. And we would always say, oh my gosh, what's missing? Because we knew we weren't thieves. Everything's gone. My sweater's gone. And we'd say, which sweater? My gray sweater. So we'd search around and we'd find the sweater. We found your sweater. That's not my sweater. It's got your name written in it. You wrote my name. Oh my gosh, go arrest him. Then we learned validation, and in validation you mirrored it. So the next time she came out, oh my gosh, everything's gone, I'm losing everything, you're a bunch of thieves. We waved back at her. We said, oh my goodness, everything's lost, everything's being stolen. We said back to her what she said, not in a mocking way, not in a, I'm not taking you serious, but in a, I want to hear what you have to say, and I'm listening to you. And each time she vented at us, we said it back in the same tone, and we waved with her, and she started to calm down. And after she said, I'm losing everything, for the umpteenth time we said, you're losing everything, she said, I'm losing all my friends. She was grieving her friends, because at age 90, she'd lost a lot of friends. But because of dementia, she couldn't say, hey, I'm sad, I'm thinking about my friends today. It came out as a sweater. As long as we focused on the sweater, we got nowhere. Oftentimes, theft is a symbol of something lost. Wedding rings, a lot of different things can have symbols. You may never understand what it is, but by validating those emotions, you can help the person work through them. There we go. Don't talk down or treat them like a child. Sometimes the behavior may be childlike, but this is still an adult. And they are reliving things from the past. They are doing difficult things. I can't tell you how many folks have said, well, I had to tell my dad in stern language to quit that. And I say, your dad can't remember what you said. You can make him upset. You can make him miserable right now, but he's not going to remember the next day. So do match their tone and volume and show them that you're taking it serious. Don't tell them they've already told you the story. Because here again, so I was joking about where you're from. Where are you from? Where were you born? Yes, you. Where were you born? Valentine, Texas. Nebraska. Okay. Now, if you told me that and I told you you'd already told me that 3 other times, how would you feel? Wouldn't feel very good. Yeah. Especially if you valued our relationship. You know. So again, I can tell you all day long. I will tell you, my grandmother would tell the story of my grandfather surviving World War I. I've probably heard that 100 times. And every time that somebody would get frustrated with it, it made her miserable. But if we could just enjoy the story every time, it was a gift to her. And you have to think about it. And it's tough. But if you can just listen to the person and enjoy the time, that is a gift. By the way, that's part of the reason we encourage folks with farther along dementia not to come into assisted living. Because in assisted living, other residents don't want to hear the same story again and again and again. In memory care, folks are just as happy to hear a story the 5th time as they were the 1st time because they don't remember it. And you can tell if a person doesn't want to hear your stories. You can tell if a person's interested. And so having a person with dementia around other people with dementia can be much healthier. So be willing to listen to the same story over and over. So what can you do now? Well, cognitive training. Use it or lose it. After my mother passed away, my father went into depression. He spent a couple of years just playing solitaire on his computer and his brain went to mush. Finally talked him into moving into what was then the Presbyterian community. He had brain stimulation and he flourished. He had some of the best years of his life. Get involved. Do crossword puzzles. Drive different directions. Try new things. Use your brain. Blood pressure control. This is a big one. Take care of your blood pressure. It can cause incredible damage if it's not well managed. Exercise. Both cardio and weight training. There are going to be all sorts of things being popped up about try this, try this, try this. One of the only things they've found to work is exercise. And high intensity exercise as much as you can. You got to get that brain pumping, get that blood pumping. Eating well. Avoid processed food, like I talked about. The stuff they put in processed food is not good. My wife started us on organics 20 years ago. I thought it was the biggest bunch of hooey until she made me start reading labels and seeing what was in the food. By the way, do you know what our grandparents called organic food? Food. That's what it was. That means it's basically in the same situation that came out of the ground. Not much healthier. Buy long-term care insurance. Once you have health issues, that ship has sailed, but if you can still get it, because we expect the cost to continue to go up. Encourage your kids to get it. That's pretty much it. I'm open for questions and answers. There's just a couple of pictures from our community here. What are questions you have? And again, there are no stupid questions. Yes?
Is it familial?
Is it familial? So, I would tell you, I believe it is, because my grandmother was one of 5, one of which died of cancer, the other 4 all had Alzheimer's. Several of her kids has Alzheimer's, several uncles had Alzheimer's. I've got a truck ton of Alzheimer's on one side of my family. You will hear people say it's not.
I call Julio because I've seen too many families that it runs through. They have said that early, if you get Alzheimer's early, when a person gets it in their 60s or 50s or even 40s, that's often much more familiar. Okay? But my grandmother didn't get it until she was in her 70s, and we had a short time. Other questions? Yes?
Are you familiar with the term anesthesia delirium?
Anesthesia delirium. So yes, couple of things on that. Recognize that when you are under anesthesia, a healthy person, it takes 1 month to get the anesthesia out for every hour they were under. So it is not uncommon for you to come out of anesthesia not having your brain working real well, especially if it was long anesthesia. We have seen people go under anesthesia and never return to normal. So that is not that uncommon. And let's talk about that a little bit, and I'm going to speak very bluntly with you. In the medical profession, do we get paid to just keep you comfortable? No, we get paid to treat you. So the incentive is to say, go for this treatment, go for that treatment, go for that treatment. There's a wonderful book called Being Immortal. Being Immortal, it was written by a surgeon who kept being called in to do surgeries on people that he knew had very short times to live. And he recognized he was making whatever time they had left miserable. You can say no to treatment. And by the way, when doctors themselves get cancer, they actually take part in about 1/3 of the treatment they typically prescribe to other people because they know how futile most of the treatment is. So never ask a doctor, is there anything we can do? Ask instead, is there anything we should do? And say, doc, if it were you, what would you want done? Because if you ask me what I think you should do, I have some professional liability because I'm a healthcare professional. But if you ask me what I personally do, I can answer you very honestly then. And oftentimes that answer is, no, I wouldn't do this. When my own mother was at the end stage, the surgeon involved said, when she was no longer eating, he said, you're going to put a tube feeding in, aren't you? And I said, oh, dear Lord, no. And he said, why not? I said, well, first off, she was adamant about that. She had been a pastor. She'd taken care of, seen too many people living on tube feeding. And I said to him, I said, do you consider this quality of life? Because there was no hope that she was not going to come back. And he said, well, she could live a couple more weeks. And I said, what would you want done if it was you? And he said, oh, I never thought about that. And I said, well, you should. My first nursing home back in 1990, I had 37 people on tube feeding. We poured artificial fluid, artificial nutrition into their stomach. We turned them every 2 hours and we cleaned them and we waited for their hearts to fail. In the 2 years I led that community, several of them never opened their eyes once. We can extend death, but it's not extending life. If you do not have an advance directive, you need to get an advance directive. If you have not talked to your kids about what you want done, talk to your kids about what you want done. And I will tell you, it is okay to say, it's okay to say I want everything done, and it's also okay to say I don't want anything done. Because I have seen people extend death way too long. Okay? And that's a lot more than you asked, but that's a bit of a soapbox that we get on. So I'm a big believer in advance directive. An advance directive is only you making sure people know what you want done. And it's important for your family to know what is quality of life. And it's also important for you to designate a medical power of attorney and a financial power of attorney. And ideally that's one of your kids, but it doesn't have to be. My best friend gave me the medical power of attorney because he said that he knew his wife couldn't make those decisions. Okay? Somebody that you trust, give that power. All right, we'll hop off that soapbox. Other questions yet? Yes?
Sir, I'm going to ask you, what would you do if you had this situation?
Okay, so
If you have sleep deprivation,
okay.
which is worse, taking drugs to help you sleep, or just living with it, or doing the natural way?
So I'm not an expert on sleep deprivation. I'm fortunate that I've never had to deal with it. And generally when you deal with something, you become expert at it, and that's not something we deal with in senior care. But if I was dealing with it, I would go get the absolute best physicians. Okay? And let's talk about that. Physicians have ratings. Okay? Google them, search them out, talk to medical professionals. You notice I've got this brace on. I broke my elbow, and I made the mistake of just following where my doctor sent me to. He sent me to a well-known orthopedic group not far from here, and I got really bad guidance and advice, and after it refracturing, I went down to Dallas
to the Carroll Clinic, where the same surgeon that does the Mavericks looked at it and said, you should have had surgery 2 months ago, and he did surgery, and now I'm healing, okay? But there is a big difference between good and great, and so I get medical support, but I do your research ahead of time. The orthopedic group that I went to without questioning did not have reviews posted, and it was really tough to find them. Carroll Clinic posts their reviews on every one of their doctors, and they are top notch. So go get great help, but sleep deprivation can be very, very serious. Do address it. Okay? Yes, back.
I know that Alzheimer's can be detected in protein from doing a skin sample. And I was told, our son's a doctor, and he said that typically that sometimes you could see it in your skin, or that Alzheimer's starts even 40 years, sometimes before it's diagnosed.
So there's a lot of theory around there. One of the things that stuck out with me, they did a study with a group of nuns. These nuns had been in a convent from age 20 till they died. And so it was a perfect test group because they'd eaten the same thing, they'd lived in the same environment, everything. They could predict with 93% accuracy who would get Alzheimer's based on the way they wrote their thesis when they moved in. So when I hear about cures, I'm always skeptical because, if the die is cast that early on, that makes me worried. And so, the question always comes up, should you get those tests? And that's a very individual question. As I shared, I've got a lot of Alzheimer's in my family. I don't want to know. I want to live my life to the fullest. I already have long-term care insurance. I'm going to live everything I can and hope that I'm successful, but I've already, done the precautions ahead of time. But they are making some breakthroughs. I don't know about the skin assessment.
You can get one.
Okay.
And also they can tell a lot through a PET scan, which I wasn't aware of until this.
So, but that goes to getting the right folks. And there will also be a lot of scams out there too. And by the way, your best doctors are typically in the heart of the big cities. The best doctors are typically not in the suburbs. We're way out here in the suburbs, but if you want to get the best, go into Fort Worth, go into Dallas. We have wonderful treatment down there. UT Southwestern has a great program. I'm not saying there aren't good docs out here, but there are less of them out here than there are in town. But to your point, they are making great strides with tests. You just have to decide if you want it.
That's the odd thing, because with early detection, you can get on medicine that can help potentially slow it down.
So, clearly,
Versus does it cure, but it can
yeah,
slow it down.
there are some medications that can slow it. And I assure you, if I was starting to show the symptoms, I would aggressively do it. I just don't, at my age, want to know if I'm going to get it. Okay? But that's an individual preference. If you're starting to get the symptoms, by all means, get it checked out. Yes, sir.
Aren't there a number of drugs currently in trial in regards to dementia?
There are a number of drugs in trial, and my only skepticism is throughout my 35-year career, every year or two we have a breakthrough, and then it turns out to not really do much. Okay? There was a recent drug that the government, Medicare, is spending unbelievable amounts of money on that is not really doing anything. They just politically didn't want to say no to something that had gone through the vet. So yes, I'm hopeful, but in my 35 years career, I haven't seen it. I've seen things that delay. Exercise is one of the big things. And by the way, they have done autopsies of people whose brains showed all the amyloid tangles and beta blocks that they should have dementia, and they never showed the signs. So, there are exercise and eating right seemingly do have some impact. We'll still go here and then we'll go there. Yes.
Between diagnosis with Alzheimer's and dying, what is the average span of time?
So Alzheimer's is one of the easier ones to predict. 6 to 8 years is typically what we see from diagnosis to death. And by the way, when people, and let's talk a little bit about that. People often think, oh my goodness, I'm starting to have problems, and we'll have people come to us and they're saying, I need to have 20 years worth of money. You don't. The extreme outliers can live longer, but mostly it's 6 to 8 years. By the time you move into a care setting, by national averages, you're in the last 1.5 to 2.5 years of your life. And when people ask me how long they have left, I say, what does the last 6 months and what does the last year look like? If it looks like this, you probably have a good bit of time. If it looks like this, you're on a decline that's going to continue. And I always say, let's make the most of it, enjoy, have fun, let's do everything we can, because every day is now very important. All right, person behind, yes.
Is there anything you can do for a person that it's very clear to you that you realize they have an issue? They don't want to talk about it, and they don't want to take any steps to try to
Okay.
reverse it.
So one of the hardest things is to allow a person to make bad decisions. My father was very, very stubborn, and he had a lot of health issues. He didn't need to because he just wouldn't get the drugs. You can try your hardest, but until they become a danger to themselves or others, there is limits to what you can do. But being empathetic, and you can say, boy, I know this is hard. I know it's hard to be struggling. And so here again, I don't know the person, but if you can get them to open up and assure them that you're going to support them, that you understand how difficult it is, and maybe even just say, hey, if you're struggling, there are reversible things, but we've got to get you treatment. Because if we can get you back to feeling better, get you back to functioning better, oh, what a gift that would be. And I'm happy to visit with you afterwards, but I will tell you, I had to make peace with the fact that in my own father's case, he was stubborn enough, he was going to get himself in trouble, and he did, because there was nothing I could do. And if I forced myself, I was going to severely damage the relationship. And quite frankly, most of us don't want somebody to take over our care. You know? That said, if it is your spouse, and if it is the person that you have responsible for, sometimes you do have to step in to keep them from A, losing all the money, putting themselves in danger, and those sort of things. We had a hand up here in the blue back, yes.
Would you be willing to share your slides?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to. It's a big presentation, so it may or may not go through to every email, but we'll certainly try. So get with Michelle in the back, and we'll be happy to. Okay? Yes?
My aunt and uncle, he died last year, but he had terrible dementia. And none of the kids could convince her to put him somewhere. That is, it's harder on the person without dementia, I assume, than the person with. How do you all come to the house and help take them there and induce them? I mean, what's the transition? How do you do that?
So I can tell you, I can't tell you how many times in my career I've seen the healthy spouse die before the sick spouse because they wear themselves out. Okay? And you know, have you ever heard the saying, "Denial ain't just a river in Egypt"? You don't want to believe that the person that has been your partner your whole life is going through that, and denial is very, very powerful. You can, and I don't mean to brag, but I was able to talk my dad into senior care in just 5 years. So if it took me 5 years and I work in the field, you can appreciate it's hard. 6 months after he moved in, he said, "Wow, I should have done this long ago." I was like, "Yeah, you really should." So just know it is brutal, it is hard. Also recognize that the generation that we're seeing in senior care, their memories of senior care are horrible because the care centers that their parents needed were horrible places. Okay? And by the way, there's a lot of bad places out there. And you have to recognize in the state of Texas, the oversight by the state is a joke. I will tell you, our communities are wonderful. We won Best of McKinney 4 years, won Best of Denton County. Our McKinney site has never been inspected once. Not once. That should never happen. They should be out there every year. Why are they not inspected? Because they're always going to the places they're getting complaints about. But you can run a memory care and assisted living without nurses, without certified nursing assistants, without certified people passing the medications, and you only have to have a GED to run. So there's a lot of bad places. We're big on keep government off the backs of business. Healthcare is one we kind of need oversight on. So buyer beware, but recognize that a lot of folks do have those bad memories. If you can have them come out and see a good community, sometimes that will alleviate that because the memories they have are the nursing homes of the 80s, which were horrible. Okay? But you can try everything. Sometimes it is not. And they tell us seniors fall into 4 categories. The planners, who decide way ahead of time what they're going to do. They choose the place. They say, I'm going to go in there early. Then you have the people that have a health scare. The health scare says, oh my gosh, something could happen. I've recovered, but I want to plan ahead of time. Then you have the people that come to us because they know their health is declining. They've got a diagnosis and the clock's ticking. And then you have the folks that come to us because the ambulance brings them. And it's much better if you plan this ahead of time. I will tell you, my parents did a very good job of planning everything out. It was the greatest gift they could have given to us kids. Get your affairs in order, get your power of attorneys in order, make your decisions, tell your kids, hey, if something happens, this is the community I want to go to. Otherwise, you're dealing exactly what you did where they stubbornly want to stay. Okay? Yes?
What about care for the caregiver?
So important. And as I said, I've many times seen the healthy spouse die before the sick spouse. You need to have a break. And the other thing is, people often, we feel that we have to take care of a loved one at home. And I'm not saying that that's not right, but you can wear yourself out. In a good community, and I say a good community, you have fresh staff coming on every 8 hours that can come in, engage, keep it fun, and then they get to go home and have a break. And a new staff's coming in, they can engage and go home. When you are 24/7 the caregiver, you don't have that break. And so it is, and the other thing is, a good community, you're putting the person with other people that have similar memories, similar situations, they can have a lot of fun. So a good community can be a great break for the caregiver, and I say you can go back to being the spouse again instead of the caregiver 24/7. But you have to take care of yourself, whether that's friends giving you a break, whether that's adult daycare, or whether that's placing it. Okay? And I hope I'm answering that left now. All right.
Being a caregiver is like living through COVID all the time. You don't see people, you don't have people to talk to. You have to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
It's very isolating.
Yeah.
And when you come out of that, you're lost. It takes a long time to get over being a caregiver.
And you have kind of oriented your whole life towards that. We've had, and whether that's at home, or we've had families that, would come and visit every day, and their loved one passes, they're like, I don't know what to do with myself anymore. It is difficult, and if you have a friend that's going through this, give them a break. Offer to take them out, offer to do the grocery shop for them, or come sit with their loved ones so they can get a break, because it is brutally difficult. We have a hand over here, yes.
What are the key elements to look for in a long-term care insurance?
What are the key elements to look for in a long-term care insurance policy? A company with a history of not raising rates. So what you want is an agent who represents multiple lines. Because if they represent one line, guess which one they're going to tell you is the best? The one and only do. And the reality is that different companies are better for different family histories. So for instance, the policy I have is from one company, the policy my wife has is from a different company. Because based on our family history, different policies lined up. So find an agent you trust that represents multiple lines. And if you want, I'm happy to give you the name of the agent I've worked with for 30 years. He did my policy, and I trust him. I'd be happy to give you that name. Okay? Yes?
I'd just like to say that before the decision about going into the care home, the biggest decision, hardest thing is taking away the car keys.
Yes.
And then secondly, I just wanted to emphasize that it's important for people to not project on the other person what you would want in that situation, because if that person has said they don't want a feeding tube, then it would be wrong to say, well, I just can't do that to them. A person without a feeding tube is not starving. They're not suffering. And if that's what they said they wanted, then we need to honor their wishes and do what they wanted, not what we think we would want if we were in that situation.
And to that point, our bodies are really well designed. They shut down at end of life really, really well unless we muck it up. We can stick tubes in you, we can stick ventilators on you, we can keep that body going for a long time. How many of us want to live like that? None of us do, okay? And yet the medical professional will often push you in that way. And I will tell you, I was thankful my mom was adamant about none of that, because we had people saying, oh my gosh, you're going to starve. No, we're going to let her shut down naturally.
But I'm not talking about the doctor, I'm talking about family members.
Oh yeah, and we had friends from church going, oh my gosh, you're doing that. Like, yes, we are. Because, and we would tell them our experience. But prior to that, they were horrified. You will hear from everybody's opinion, okay? And by the way, one other thing on that, when a loved one is starting to decline, sibling rivalries will come out in spades. I was asked to preview a book on taking care of parents, and that section I thought was overly harsh. And then when I went through it with my parents, I was like, oh my gosh, that was spot on. Because all of a sudden, my older sister was telling me what to do again. And you'd be amazed at the things that come up. You need to try to get everybody on the same page, but also recognize those from a distance that haven't seen the decline won't always believe it. Denial is very, very powerful. So get those things designated ahead of time, put somebody in charge, empower them. I think we had a hand over here. Yes.
Memory care is one of the most expensive cares that you can get, isn't that right?
It can be, it certainly can.
So if you have like a sister or an aunt that you're kind of seeing over and they need memory care, but they don't have the money, what are the options?
So let's talk about that. For starters, when you do senior care and assisted living nursing home, there's kind of 3 levels. You have your lower end communities where you're not going to have much of any nurses. The staff are not going to be state certified providing the care or passing the medication. So there's med errors all the times in those places. UTIs are rampant. Those are typically in the $4,000 to $6,000 a month range. Okay? When you get up into the $6,000 to $8,000 a month range, you'll have a little bit more nursing support. You'll probably have a nurse on day shift and evening shift, and they won't be as stretched as in the bottom end communities. You may have a certified person passing medications. You probably still won't have certified people providing care. That's in the $6,000 to $8,000. You're getting $9,000 and above before you get a nurse 24/7. You get state certified people providing care, and you get state certified people passing meds. The options, first off, if a person is a veteran or their spouse was a veteran and they served during a time of war, even for 1 day, and that doesn't mean they were in the war, they just served, which may well mean that they were here stateside for 1 day of the Vietnam War. They qualify for a program called Aid in Attendance. But that is a program when the assets are below $150,000. Other than that, you do have to pay for it. The state does have Medicaid, but recognize we are in Texas. Texas does not have a safety net. Texas pays second lowest in the nation for Medicaid. And so you get what you pay for. We used to joke that Texas set their Medicaid rates by the thank God for Mississippi approach that says, yeah, it's bad, but it's better than Mississippi. Mississippi pays $30 a day more than Texas does. So get long-term care insurance. Don't count on the state. Do know that that is the safety net. That is the place of last resort, but nursing home care, Medicaid is it. If a person doesn't have it, you can sometimes find little group homes where people have bought a house and they have 3 to 4 people there, or 5 to 6 people. If they are 3 to 4, they are unlicensed, and you hold. If they are more than 4, it is licensed, then you get a little bit of oversight. But those are the least expensive options. Sometimes you can get care in there in the $2,000 to $3,000 a month range. Okay. Did you have a question?
Can you discuss the role of animals and pets?
Yes. So animals and pets can be very beneficial, as long as you're not tripping over them. So, sometimes we see falls with that, but seniors who have heart conditions and have pets live longer than those that don't. The ability to touch something to pets lowers blood pressure, reduces stress. We have cats in every one of our communities. We have dogs that visit all the time. Animals can be very, very beneficial, especially if you are struggling with your memory and struggling with problems. Pets not judging you. Pets sitting there loving on you. That can be a great gift. So we're big believers in pets. Animals, children, and music get through when nothing else does. And by the way, the hymns that you first learn are the last things you lose. And so a person in late stage dementia, if you play the hymns of their faith tradition, that will get through. When I ran the Presbyterian system, our chaplain would do services on the memory care unit of just singing. And you'd have people that were all in a ball come back to life again when the music. So very, very important. Aromatherapy is good. And by the way, whatever a person's condition is, at end of life, playing the familiar songs can ease and help with transitions. So big believers in all those things. Okay? Yes, sir.
Are you at capacity at your facilities?
We are close. Michelle, what are we? We have, I think, 1 spot open in assisted living right now. We've got just a couple in memory care. We have 3 spots. We only opened last year, so that's why we still have some. We just opened enhanced care, so we've got our heavier care. We've got some units there. We are starting to prepare to build a 5th house because having set ourselves up as really high quality, folks have come. So we do have some spots, but if we don't have exactly what you want, put it on the wait list.
I didn't quite catch where it was on the map.
So we are on 377 in Argyle. If you know where Liberty Christian is, the school, we are within walking distance of there. If you know where the Pets Spa is, we're immediate neighbors with that. Okay? Okay? Yes, sir.
Have you seen long-term care insurance, policies longer than 5 years?
I have, they're not writing them anymore. So the folks that had the old policies, oh my gosh, were those generous. And the companies kind of freaked because people were needing more care. And so they don't write those generous policies anymore. And by the way, if you have a long-term care insurance policy, make sure that back up. I have seen people that have great long-term care insurance policies get dementia and cancel the policies. So if you've got long-term care insurance, put your kids on it and say, hey, this is protecting your inheritance. Make sure it gets paid. So I tell people, get as much coverage as you can, and if possible, get the inflation rate. Because every year as the costs go up, and let's talk about that. Last year, the cost of our staff went up 10%. Okay? We held our rates at 5%, but they keep going up 10%, we're not going to be able to do that. And as I shared with you, in 1992, I was paying an LVN $750. I'm now paying that LVN $29.50. And as more and more retire, you're going to see those costs go up. So you can afford good care if you have good long-term care insurance or if you save. Okay. Yes?
How long does it typically take? Because I know, like, I'm dealing with it right now with the long-term care insurance
Yes.
for parents. And they said there's a 3-month option period. We're now in month 5.
Okay.
Waiting for them to approve it. And they say, we have everything, our adjusters are just very far behind. And so I say, well, are you going to take another 6 months? You've already taken 5. Are you waiting for the people to die before you actually approve it? And it's an A-plus company.
Okay.
They're very highly rated.
So what she was saying was she had a long-term care insurance company that's playing games with them. And you need to bird dog and you need to be a squeaky wheel.
Oh, I'll call them every week.
Okay, so, but think about, and I couldn't do this, but my kids know how to tweet their name out. Tweet and tag them and just say, this insurance company's trying to give us whatnot. They don't like bad press, okay? And, if you were to say to them, look, I've been patient, I've been kind, I've done everything, I'm about ready to go to the media on this. You gotta, and here again, squeaky wheel does make a difference on that. I can tell you we've had insurance companies lose the paperwork 3-4 times. They're just trying to make it difficult enough you quit. But good companies haven't done that, and we've been able to, in most cases, get every company to pay just by continuing on.
Due diligence.
Yeah, and we've even gone so far as to drive to their offices and hand the paperwork to them.
Well, this is in California, I can't.
That does make it tough. That does make it tough. Just make sure if you get a long-term care insurance policy, it covers home care, and it covers assisted livings and memory care communities. Because the old nursing home policies, most accept that now people get care in assisted living and memory care. I've had one policy stuck to, nope, it's not a nursing home, we're not covered.
Yeah.
But you do have to burden them. Okay? And keep documentation of everything you've sent in.
Oh,
Yes,
I
sir.
Are those companies like yours, what is the tax status? Are you for-profit or not-profit?
We are for-profit. There used to be a lot of not-for-profits. Those are lesser and lesser. For-profit's the majority. And so let's talk a little bit about ownership. Because ownership, I personally am a big believer in local. I worked for a local ownership company years ago. So I started my career in a big national corporation. I was approved to spend $100 over budget. My boss could spend $250, his boss could spend $500, his boss could spend $1,000. What I mean by that is if you needed something big, I had to go up about 6 levels. Translation, things moved very, very slowly. And it was a big corporation that had umpteen facilities. They didn't really care about you. I then worked for a local ownership group that I loved because I, as an executive director, if I had a problem, I could get the owners over in a day, we could address it and get it taken care of. So I am a big believer in local ownership. The worst ownership is REITs, real estate investment trusts. If a REIT buys a facility, stay away. Because they have one goal and one goal only, to leave that facility and make every bit of money they can. Okay? Not-for-profits, there are a couple of good ones. You have a mixed bag. On the plus side, they don't have a profit motive. On the downside, sometimes the boards don't really understand what's going on, and sometimes a good leader can do a great job, sometimes bad leaders last a little bit longer. But you have here, Good Samaritan is kind of our only area not-for-profit. They've had one community do a good job, one not do as a good job. You have St. Christus and Coppell is your other one. Your others are in Dallas, and some are good, some are average. We are a for-profit. We do build a smaller profit margin in than the industry standard because we intend to be successful by running full. Yes?
First of all, I just you've seen the camera.
Okay, no, I didn't know that.
Okay. It's okay that I videoed?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I want to let the audience know that within a couple of days, I will have the video of this presentation on the Living Well website. Okay, so.
And let me just say too, when you're judging a community, do check out their reviews, but don't stop at how many their reviews. Actually read the reviews, because a lot of people play the game of having their staff write reviews and having their friends write reviews. And you can look at a review and see if it was written by a family member. If they talk about, my loved one had this experience, that review carries a whole lot better than, oh, this place is first class, you should try it out. The SEO game, SEO is search engine optimization. The internet groups tell us get as many reviews as you can. So we push our families to give reviews. We don't push others to give reviews. Others get every friend, vendor, others to write reviews. And so we know of a community that has over 60 5-star reviews, but if you look at them, only about 10% are families. Ours are about 90% families. Okay? So do that extra research. The other thing, if you're looking at a community, pop in on a weekend. Pop in, talk to family members, grab people in the parking. Are you happy or are you not? Would you place a loved one here? And ask more than one person, because you may find that parentally happy person, you may find that parental grump. So ask a couple of folks, but here again, say, I'm thinking about placing a loved one, would you place them? Yes?
What specialty of physician do you recommend to make that decision if someone has Alzheimer's?
So,
early stages?
Yeah, there are people that specialize in that. And if you'll check with Michelle, we'll give you some recommendations. But, and one of the things you have to realize, there are wonderful doctors there, but by and large, their egos are a little bit bigger than the average bear. And they often feel that they can cover everything. You want a person that is specific to that area.
Well, that's why I didn't know if a geriatrician
Geriatrician?
versus a neuropsychologist.
Yeah, so we'll give you some specific names. A geriatrician is a good start, but there are those that specialize in dementia. Okay. Other questions? All right, last question? Yes.
Just one final question. Is there a cut-off age limit to apply or to get long-term care insurance?
In theory, no, but they will charge you a whole lot more, and it can borderline be cost prohibitive. But, so I got it when I was 45. I started off paying $1,500 a year. I now pay $1,800 a year because they've gone up on me once. But when you recognize that that's probably about 4 to 5 days of care, it makes good sense for me. If you could, here again, there will be few and far between, and they are getting stingier. You just have to decide, is it worth the money? And so let's talk briefly about that. If you have enough money that you can pay for your care just off the earnings from your investments, you don't need long-term care insurance, unless you want that money to go specifically to somebody. If you are going to run out of money in 6 to 9 months anyway, it doesn't really do much any good. You might as well just plan and you'll be on Medicaid. But if you're somewhere in between that, long-term care insurance does make good sense. Again, check with Michelle or Maria. I'll give you the name of my agent, and he can tell you if he can get you ready. Okay. Thank you all for coming. I'm happy to come back today.